A warm welcome to the very first module in remote teaching. So this module is aimed to really answer the question, what is basic good practice in remote education? And I pose the question because at the moment, not many of us know. I think very few of us know because we've all had to adopt very quickly and learn very fast. And it's difficult to work out what good practice is when you are delivering what essentially was emergency education. I think there's a real distinction to make there. This isn't something that we've chosen. This is an emergency and we've had to respond. But in my own experience, what I've found are some timeless and transferable principles which I think make some form of good practice. And in the first module, I would like to share those with you. So what I'm hoping to cover in this module is which principles transfer easily. So there are some timeless principles in teaching, and I've found that some of these transfer quite easily to remote education, and I just wanted to share those with you in this course. So firstly, like with any unit of work, you would plan. You know, all good learning starts with good planning. And what I tried to do with the subject that I was teaching was try to break it down into a course. And by doing so, it forced me to think about what I needed to exclude. Because with remote education, you can't possibly fit everything in the curriculum that you would normally. So you have to have a reduced offer. And that's just a compromise and a trade-off that we have to accept. So you really have to think about what is it that I can afford to leave out. And when I did this short course, I didn't really introduce much new. So most things were things that they had already encountered or that I was building upon. So try not to introduce new content into your remote teaching. So this is just a simple planning template that I designed for myself. It's got the week on the far left in terms of the time frame in which I want to cover the skills. It's got what is being assessed and how it's being assessed. I think that's really important as well, because you want to think about how are you going to assess these things in the remote space. So I think that's a crucial area to think about. I know Daisy Christodoulou often kind of espouses that point as well. When we're designing learning opportunities, let's think backwards. Let's think about what we're going to assess and how we can actually assess it rather than what are the tasks. And then I think about, okay, what kinds of tasks would be conducive to meet my learning aims or the students' learning aims, and then the resources that are required. For me, that's not an afterthought, but I think that should come last rather than, okay, what's going to be fun for the students or what's going to be a really nice task. So then your teaching becomes task-based rather than learning-based. So I always think about, okay, what are the skills and the knowledge that I'm going to assess. Next, how we start lessons. So I would usually start my remote teaching lesson with a thinking question. And this was around students, A-level students developing their own opinions. I often try to make my learning opportunities topical, not always because that's not always possible, but I thought, you know, the virus was a really kind of prime moment for generating discussions around what's topical and politics and social policy and public health policy and all of these kinds of things. And for the course that I was teaching, this was really relevant. You know, if you're teaching something around the humanities, the arts, maybe even maths, I'm sure you could bring this current topic in somehow. I'm not saying that's completely necessary, but that's just something that I often try to do. And I make sure that my images match to my content. So it's got nothing to do with my opinion about Donald Trump. I could have had, you know, some other image there that represented my opinion, but that would have detracted from what I was getting them to think about. So always try to make sure that your images reflect your content. Another kind of timeless principle, I would say, really, is the success criteria. This is something that I find many teachers forget to do. And in the past, I've forgotten to do it, but it's almost become, routine. Decide where you're going and share that with the pupils, because what that does, that grounds you in structure and direction, and it also primes them for the direction of the learning. And you can have a chat about the success criteria, which ones they think they will find hard, which ones do they think they're going to find easy. But I would say this is good. This is timeless good practice, and I personally have found that this transfers to the remote teaching space. Another thing I would say is model. Again, another timeless principle. So, without teaching your grandmother to suck eggs, for my international listeners, that's not a derogatory statement. Teaching your grandmother to suck eggs is just a British expression. It's kind of like teaching you to do something that you already know. It's common. But sometimes we forget these things, especially when we're trying to learn something new, like being able to teach remotely. So I always model, and one of the modeling approaches I use is here's one I made earlier. And I will show them what my one looks like, and we will go through it. So here's a piece of descriptive writing, which you don't necessarily need to read, but I would then go through that with my students and kind of unpick what makes it a good piece of descriptive writing. Or, if you're a maths teacher, it might be an equation, and how you look at both sides of the equation and you'll model that. Or it might be long addition and how you carry over the tens and how you carry over the units. So modeling is a key aspect. I also model through my visualizer, so I use live modeling sometimes. So if I'm writing a portion of an essay, or I want to show them how to write an introduction, I won't always have the here's one I made earlier. Sometimes that's great for saving time, but sometimes I want them to see the actual process and the craft that goes into it, how I will change words and change phrases or change whole sentences. So live modeling is another kind of timeless principle, really, that helps you to communicate the learning content and your learning aims. Another way I do live modeling is through YouTube. So I use YouTube quite a lot to host some of my remote teaching. And one of the great things about YouTube is that once you put it up there and you upload it to the account, it's there for students to go at their own pace. So they can go over it again and again and again at their own pace. So that's another way that I live model. Once I've modeled, I will always have some kind of output. I really want some kind of output in my remote teaching. I don't want students to walk away without having really grafted or really worked hard. So this is quite versatile, actually, because if you're giving your students a task, it doesn't have to be during the live remote session. You could end the session once you've gone through the modeling and say, right, your homework, which is really now a consolidation task, your homework is to now go and produce this piece of writing or go and complete these 10 maths problems. So what you're doing, you're getting them to think about the content when you're not there. And this is when the learning happens. When students are thinking hard and they're thinking independently, and then there's time for feedback, obviously. And I will come on to feedback in one of the later modules. And I will come on to something called deliberate practice in one of the later modules as well. That explains this approach a little bit more. Then I would usually end with a summary. And my summary is your plenary, really, how you wrap up the learning. This isn't an exhaustive structure, by the way. I do need to add, these are just a few little nuggets that I'm taking that could help you in designing your remote teaching instruction. So your plenary could be send a tweet out or write a tweet, or it could be write 5 questions on this topic. This is just one example of one of my plenaries, which is a summary in 2 sentences, summarize the main aspects of approaching the essay question and planning your essay response. The idea is to get students to think about what they learned in a concise fashion. And if they can summarize it in a concise fashion, I can see what has started to stick, not what has stuck, what has started to stick. And again, in one of the later modules, I will come on to spaced practice and retrieval practice, which helps to embed learning and improve rates of retention. So this is the end of the first module, nice and short. You can contact me, my email address. I know many of you have contacted me via LinkedIn. Please feel free to contact me there. And my blog as well, where I have a few blogs on remote teaching. And I have put one of the links to one of the blogs in the descriptions box of this module. So if you look in the descriptions box, you will find a link that takes you to one of the blogs that expounds upon one of the ideas in this module. I hope this has been useful for you, and all the best with embedding these techniques, and I would love to hear how you get on with some of these. So please, shout it out on LinkedIn, your social media platforms, and contact me and let me know how you're getting on. All the best.